This horror movie shows that sometimes darkness can bring about the light of creativity. I'm reviewing the Shudder original movie, A Nightmare Wakes. Hey Twisted people, it's your Twisted Woman here, Chauncey K. Robinson, and today I am doing a spoiler-free review of the Shudder original movie, A Nightmare Wakes. While composing her famous novel, Frankenstein, Mary Shelley descends into an opium-fueled fever dream while carrying on a torrid affair with Percy Shelley. As she writes, the characters of her novel come to life and begin to plague her relationship with Percy. Before long, she must choose between love and her literary masterpiece. A Nightmare Wakes is what I would call, and probably other people would call, history-inspired horror. It's horror that takes on real, actual happenings, figures in history, and adds a horror-tinged tint to them when it comes to telling aspects of their story. And that's the case with Nightmare Wakes. A Nightmare Wakes takes place in what would be considered Mary Shelley's most tumultuous time in her life, which is her love affair with Percy Shelley, two very real figures in history. And, you don't have to go too far to find out what actually happened between them and Mary Shelley's very interesting story. And what A Nightmare Wakes does is take a small snippet of their lifetime and puts a horror tinge to it. It brings some of the actual real darkness and the grief that they had dealt with, particularly Mary Shelley, and puts it in more of a direct link and connection with how the story, the epic science horror fiction story, the first of its kind, Frankenstein, was created. And I think when it does this, you have to understand that it's not an exact historical interpretation, like not at all. But it does do a very good job of putting a horror symbolic twist on certain things, real things that Mary Shelley dealt with in her lifetime, such as miscarriages and the torrid love affair with Percy Shelley and some of the issues that went on with a relationship that was so significant in Mary Shelley's life. So what you have is history inspired, but not necessarily historically accurate when it comes to this interpretation, but I don't think it's necessarily trying to be. So I wouldn't go into this film being like, that's wrong, that didn't happen, how could that happen? That's not what you do going to a film like this. It's more so, I think it used some really cool ways of interweaving the story of Frankenstein into Mary Shelley's story in particular, and some of the things that happened to her that may or may not have inspired the heart and the theme of Frankenstein. It's a horror film. I definitely think it's a horror film. Some very horrific things happen in this film, but not necessarily in the sense of jump scares. It's not going to be one of those things where it's like, and I actually, did you like my acting of my, yes, I have a theater degree. When it comes to this, I was actually very happy about this because I was when I first heard about the project, I was like, okay, A Nightmare Wakes based off of Mary Shelley's life, a horror film based off of Mary Shelley's life. Okay, is this going to be like Abraham Lincoln Zombie Hunter film, which I actually liked, or was it Vampire Hunter? I think there were two actually. I think it was Abraham Lincoln Zombie Hunter and Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Two different movies, same kind of concept, and I think I tended to like both. Yeah, I did. But I was kind of like, I don't really think I want to see Mary Shelley fighting like the undead to kind of, come across, Frankenstein. I don't think we have to do that with this, really prolific woman's story. So I was kind of like, is it going to go that route? It does not go that route. When it comes to this story, it very much deals with making the inner demons physical in the sense, or they are showed, but it isn't so much so maybe a supernatural entity, if not some of the demons that we can find in our minds and in our hearts and between our loved ones and our relationships, and how that can be terrifying in and of itself. And I appreciated that it went that route and not some of those, Pride and Prejudice versus Zombie. I think you'd get a little bit more out of it if you actually read up on her biography. At the heart of this movie is a story about a woman who is having to choose between somewhat of a toxic love affair, but someone she really loves, and her, I don't want to say her career, but her artistic individual, who she is, the parts of herself that she doesn't want to repress, things like that, and what that means when it comes to that or a life with this person. And that's what you see throughout the film. It's kind of that struggle that she goes back and forth with. That's the heart of it. Of course, like I said, it's tinged with the horror elements, of course, but at the heart of it, it's that kind of story, which I think actually really worked for how it was told. It's a small cast. One of the things I actually really liked about it is that it seemed like it was blind casting when it came to it, because certain historical figures that I know for sure are real are in there, but they were changed in terms of like their race and things like that. So I thought that was really cool, because why not when it comes to these kind of stories at this point, right? It's 2021, I don't think, unless it's like really, really central to the character when it comes to characters who have historically been portrayed as white, then I don't see the problem with that. And it was nice to kind of see a diverse cast in a setting like this where you don't always expect that. So that was definitely something that worked in my opinion. And with that said, I think the main central character is Mary Shelley. That's who you are spending the most time with. And I think at times you will, if you are similar to me, at times you won't like her. Because certain decisions she makes, certain ways she finds herself in. She's not an easy character to love necessarily, but I think that is what actually makes this really good storytelling, because you're not just seeing things happen to this character who is already evolved and who they are. You're seeing this character evolve. You're watching this character's arc. You're watching this character through pain and strife and terrible things happening, and seeing how they come out of it and what they create out of it. And that means that character isn't going to be perfect in the very beginning, if they ever become perfect at all. So it was nice to see that. But like I said, there will be times, I know I was watching it at times and I was like, really? So that might frustrate you a little, or it might actually entice you when it comes to this story. The trigger warnings for A Nightmare Wakes are miscarriage, non-consensual sexual situations, child death. My final twisted grade for A Nightmare Wakes is a B. Okay, people, that's my spoiler-free review of the Shudder original movie, A Nightmare Wakes. Let me know your thoughts, comment down below, and also be sure to subscribe so that you are the first to know when I post my videos. Thanks for watching. Let's get creepy together.